Hey guys, my name is Ben McSherry. I'm going to talk about the JST Soar plugin today. It's an emulation of an analog tape head, which if you're anything like me, you've always wanted, and unfortunately, if you're anything like me, you're broke, and you can't spend $3,000 on an Echoplex. I've looked for years to find a great digital representation of one of these units, and I've always been pretty let down by things that are too clinical. They don't carry the warmth and the mojo that you get from the analog unit. And I have to say, I've had the JST Soar for about a week and I'm blown away. So let's take a look at the session from the intro clip and the ways that I used it there, and then dive into the plugin and go over some of the great tones that we can get out of it. So an interesting trick that I picked up from Warren Hewitt actually is to take an input signal that's panned hard one way, so in this case a rhythm guitar that's hard left, and the effect for a delay or a reverb is going to be panned the complete opposite direction, so hard right. So what we'll get is an input that's coming from this direction, and then the reflections, like in real life, are going to come back the opposite direction instead of coming from behind the input source. And it just gives a great sense of depth and dimension to these instruments and makes it feel very lifelike. So if this is the input source, so we get those repeats coming back from the other way. And it just fills out a mix really nicely. And what I've done with both of these guitars, if I've actually made two slightly different instances for the plugin, so they're mono, so we're able to pan them like that. And because they're different, like they have a different amount of health, a different age, etc., it's actually going to feel like two individual units, even though they're double guitars. They're playing the same line. So those reflections, because we have those discrepancies and those variations between them, we get a really realistic sense of having used multiple instances of multiple performances of the same thing rather than just a bigger version of the same thing, which I really like. I really like having some of that disparity between takes. Not enough to make it sound like it's sloppy, but enough to make it sound like there's discernible multiple instruments sometimes. Something that has a lot more openness like this song does. It works really well for it. The lead guitar, we've got one here, which it's dialed in a little lower for the send, if we can see over here. And that's just to give us a little more space for the notes in the solo to have some clarity in them. And again, it's dialed in slightly different than the others, just because having the exact same effect with something that we really want those irregularities to shine through, why not dial them all in differently and get as much of that individuality between these units as we can? So the last place I used one really quick is just on the snare at the end for this drum bus. Just for some texture and fun as a fade out, just make it nice and gritty for that repeat. To go over some of the features, we have our different tape head options, which over here we're going to have heads 1 and 2, heads 2 and 3 together, then heads 3 and 1 together, single head, and then the multi-head is all three of them. We're going to have an 8th note, a dotted 8th note, and a 16th note for the different head options. You can always, when you're in the plugin, hit enter, and it's going to bring up this little cursor that'll let you go hover over these different parameters and let you know what they're going to be in case you get confused. So this repeat knob is going to be similar but not precisely the same as the feedback knob on a modern delay. We're going to have the repeats are going to get cycled through the effect again. So if we turn it up too high, we start to get that infinite repeat that happens as it starts to feedback on itself and it starts to repeat the repetitions and so on. But the nice thing is when it's on lower settings is those repeats start to kind of eat themselves and start to decay in a nice odd fashion for me. So the age knob is going to affect the actual tape itself. As it goes up, you're going to start to lose information faster. So it really simulates how if this machine were sitting around for 15, 20, 30 years, that tape would start to get worn out. And would it be able to hold that information? You'd start getting a little more distortion and saturation in it. You wouldn't catch all the repeats quite perfectly. And that knob, the health knob, and the flutter knob are very intricately linked to each other. As you start to change one, it affects how the other is going to respond with your decay, with your warbling, the flutter that you get, which we really like from these machines. I mean, that's the whole point of having one. So if the health is all the way up, you're going to have a healthy machine. You're not going to get as much decay and flutter. And then the age of the tape is going to affect that as well. So if we play with the health all the way down, but the age all the way up and the flutter all the way up, it's going to decay really fast, but you can hear it start to modulate and start to fluctuate a lot. As the age goes back down, it's going to last a bit longer, and we're going to start to hear that modulation increase and start to get more distorted as it fades out. So the contour knob, think of it like a reverse presence knob. The lower the knob is, the more in your face the repeats are going to be. As we bring it all the way up, we start to attenuate them. It starts to get subdued. So for me, I like keeping it all the way down here because I want to hear those artifacts of these tape machines. I want to hear the warble and the degradation of the repeats. So I can't tell you how happy this plugin makes me. It makes me want to sit down and play guitar and write and be creative. It makes me feel inspired. It's just so lush and warm, and I was not expecting that from a digital product. It's been so long that I've been looking for one that feels as realistic and as natural as this does. So hats off to the guys from JST. Hats off to Joey Sturgis himself. This is phenomenal. I'm going to be using this for a long time.